The general tenor that has already been captured is we have a lot of guys under contract. So we have a lot of our team intact. You guys will probably be shocked to hear me say that I believe in the talent of the group. Groups don't get untalented from 4 months or 5 months in the beginning to 3 months at the back. So they can be inconsistent, and we have to address the source of that inconsistency. But the talent level really doesn't fluctuate, certainly not of an entire group that much. And one injury to JP certainly had an impact without question, just as the injuries to Jordan and Nico had an impact the year before. But with all those guys in theory back and at 100%, hopefully bodes well for next year. And again, I think that one of the positives at the end of the season was we continued to have pretty good performances from some young players. And I think we enter next season with the most possibility. We finished this year, we're still fourth from bottom in youth player minutes. And that was still a little disappointing. But, if you look at the amount now of young talent that has come in and established itself, Jackson Reagan, Danny Leyva, Obed Vargas, Josh Atencio, I think those guys, it's tough to argue with any of them. And certainly in smaller sample sizes, I think Ethan Doubleair did some good things. Dylan Tevez didn't play a lot of minutes, but scored a goal in the opportunity that he got. And Leo Chu, I think, is another one that might benefit from some more time. And, we'll see if how that one lands. But, we're going to keep working, and we have a bunch of possibilities, we think, for how to reshape the team. But going into an off season with no DP spots, I wouldn't expect radical change. And in part, philosophically, we don't believe that radical change is needed. Now, that's not to say there'll be no change. That's not the case. And we've already had to part ways with one really special veteran in Will Bruin. And I just want to use this time to say thank you to Will. He's a really special person, really special family. It's really been an honor to have him in the group for a number of years. And we just thought that by making this move now as early as possible in the cycle, it maximized his chances of getting to another team without anything needed for us. So we felt like this was in his best interest. I'm sure it's probably hard to see that big picture right now, if you will, but we just really enjoyed having him on our team. He was a huge part of us for a long time, and really grateful for his contributions to the club and to the several championships that we won, several finals that we played in with him as part of our squad. So with that, I will shut it down, and we'll open it up for questions.
As you heard Garth say, we'll take all questions as they come in. We've got plenty of time today. As a reminder, if you have one, please hit that raise hand function button so we can get to everyone and your follow-ups. Nico Moreno, you've been waiting patiently. I saw you first. Please go ahead.
Well, Garth, I wanted to touch on two things you kind of hit on. I mean, the success wasn't just CCL, but these young players that are coming in, how well Tacoma Defiance has played and the players that are in that team. But I wanted to ask you, what has worked? I mean, you've invested money, you've invested time. What has worked kind of to build that to where it is now? And what is your expectation of that continuing to be that successful?
Look, I think we try to use objective metrics for this stuff, right? Nico, it's great to say, "Oh, I like this player," or we're doing a great job, and pat yourself on the back. But in that space, we have in the last 5 years, we won the national championship, U17. We won back-to-back GA Cups in 19 and 22, and we've promoted a whole bunch of staff. John Hutchinson went over to coach in Japan, head coach at El Paso this year. Chris Little, one of the top assistant coaches with Colorado. Mark Nichols, now with I believe, the technical director with Columbus Crew. And look, we've been fortunate. And this is where being the Sounders really helps, because the culture and the brand speaks for itself. And we were able to replace Mark with Henry Bronner, who is, I think, arguably the best developer of talent in the country. He's amazing. And Hutch with Wade Weber. And Wade led us to the Western Conference Final in his first year in charge, and I think is just a cultural signpost for our organization, just a pillar, somebody who's just critical on and off the field to everything we stand for. So what I would say, Nico, and answer your question is I'm very happy with the direction of our development. I think we continue to get better. I think we continue to produce players. I can't remember if we've announced it yet or not, but we're going to have one or two signings out of that Defiance group into the first team for next season. Won't necessarily be right away, but that is coming. And so we continue to be excited about our pipeline of talent, and we continue to be excited about Steve Cook's work with the academy, and what they're capable of, and the kind of players that they're developing for us long term as well. Because I think there's some real talent that is guys are going to see coming through in the next cycle of Defiance players as well.
And the second thing you touched on should be brief. I just wanted to ask, there's been times where you guys have allowed players to go look at other offers. Will Bruin being that person, if there was to be a chance for him to be back, is that door still open?
Look, the door is open for Will in the sense that we're never going to kick him out and leave him in the street. But I think, when we look at our salary cap situation, we look at 23 signed players. That's a position where we might go out and target another player. There just might not be a lot left, and we always try to be respectful of these guys as well. I understand you can bring guys back on pay cuts, but it's not always a good idea. And you got to think of the culture of your locker room. And again, you have to have the respect for your veteran players to say, hey, what I might have or what I think we're going to have is not what you're worth. And if you can't promise something, then you better not, kind of leave them hanging around. So I don't, no. So to be clear, the door is not closed on Will Bruin, but I am not optimistic that we're going to have the resources required to give him a fair offer going forward. And that's why we've told him and given him the freedom to explore other opportunities.
Thank you, Garth.
All right, next up, I see Jeremiah Oshen. Jeremiah, go ahead and ask your question.
I guess one of the players that was left, or I guess two of the players that were left a little bit in limbo with today's announcement were Sam Adeniran and Freddie Montero. I guess with Montero, it sounds like maybe a similar situation to last year where you were continuing to negotiate with him. But is there any more light you can shed on the Adeniran situation?
Yeah, look, we haven't had Sam with us for a couple of months, right? So some of this is he's in a playoff chase with San Antonio, and so we don't want to be disruptive to them or to him. So we have spoken to Sam's representation, and what I would say is, those conversations are ongoing. And look, Sam's done really well. He's got, I believe, 25 goals now in USL in the last couple of years. I believe he was the leading scorer on San Antonio, who finished as the top team in the USL League. So, to me, he's a player that definitely has value. And, if you made me decide today, Jeremiah, we would take his option. What's not clear yet is what is the best role for Sam. And I think as we go forward, too, with a number of young players that we have, you are going to see us make more use of loans. Certainly what I would say that the Sam Adeniran move to San Antonio was successful for both sides. It helped Sam improve. It gave him more experience, and it drove up his market value. So those are situations that you may see us employ more frequently with our young players going forward.
All right, next question we'll go over to Jade Adams. Go ahead.
Thanks, Garth. In talking to Nico, one of the games toward the end of the season, he had mentioned mistakes made kind of top to bottom or things to look at top to bottom. So how has that kind of maybe been addressed, if you agree with him or if he had mentioned that, or, how have some of the errors or missteps maybe have been addressed this season?
Sure. No, and look, we met with Nico. We met with all our players after the season, and so we got feedback, from Nico and from everybody else. And obviously, Nico's our captain, so we give special weight to that one. And look, what I think he was referring to, broadly speaking, is when you make, and you've heard me refer to this off and on, Jada, when you make the playoffs 13 years in a row, I think you fall inevitably into some, maybe not inevitably, but it's very hard not to fall into a trap of we've always done it this way, so therefore it must be right. And the league is changing and the league is evolving around us. If you look at the number of young players that feature for really good teams, it is simply an essential part of being a successful club in MLS now and in the modern league. And that's something that we have to get better at. And we know that. And we have to continue to find ways to incorporate that on a first team level. And we have to continue to reinforce our structures. We've had the same group of players in place largely for most of this run. I mean, certainly since 2018, when we signed Raul Ruidiaz, and I guess in 20 we had JP. We've kind of been able to add a player a year, but the core has largely been the same. And again, I think that can lead to some complacency, some satisfaction. We went out and we won Champions League, and nobody had ever been in that situation before about, hey, effectively you've worked for, a year and a half to get to that point and you win that game. And again, I don't think our talent fell off because again, we were pretty good for a month and a half after that. But then I do think we got a little fatigued. I do think that we got a little complacent. And I think that's what some of what Nico's referring to. And so we're going to take a hard look at our structures, our player usage, and see if we can come up with some better solutions, especially knowing that culturally, at least, I think the group is going to be largely the same going into next year.
Next question, we'll go over to Maz Vida. Maz, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, Garth, and I know there's a piece of this that Brian, obviously you and Brian have a discussion on, but just the balance of bringing up young players and giving them the opportunity to learn and grow, and yet with the expectation, obviously, of getting back in the playoffs, and not just getting in the playoffs, as we all know what your expectations are, but getting back to playing for that final, just that balance that you have to really evaluate in the off season and then come to fruition during the season.
Yeah, look, some of it's balanced, Maz, but some of it's not. Like Philadelphia's in the final, in the East final, right? Dallas was in just lost in a nail biter to get knocked out. So these are clubs that are historically all youth. They're mostly youth players, right? You've seen in the last couple of years, I think RSL's had. I think they've won more playoff games than we have. It's another club that's been historically, youth oriented. So again, LAFC, a club that's done pretty well, routinely playing young players. So I think that's an old argument a little bit. Like you have to weigh winning with playing young players. And I think that's actually what's one of the things that's really important that we get past. And we have to understand that the young players can be a foundation of our success. Especially when you're talking about potentially having 4 or 5 starters, again, over the age of 30, then you need to look at things like, hey, in a 3-game week, are we going to rotate the group? You've heard me talk about here in this space before, are we going to use 9+2, 8+3 lineups, meaning 8 of the established starters and 3 of the youngsters, just to keep everybody fresh and to keep everybody on the same page and to get the maximum outputs we can from everyone. And so, for sure, there is some balance there, but if you look at our season, really what I think we're talking about balance wise is go back to last year, Maz. We play 5 teenagers against Austin, we win. On July 2nd, we played 9 under 23 players against Toronto. We win. Even as we go later in the season, in the midst of a period where we just weren't able to answer the bell at the end of the season, when we played 8 kids against Cincinnati, we get a draw, and that was probably the highest energy we had in the last 2 months. So, give me 1 second, guys.
There's a balance right there. That's awesome.
I'll buy some time by saying that is an incredible cameo appearance. I believe that's a first. But you know what, Garth?
I invited Sam to join, but Sam's a little shy. So
I'm sorry, I don't know who that was. Do you mind letting us know? Just that.
Thank you guys for understanding. This is the world I live, for better or worse. So I think I had rambled enough in my answer too. So maybe that was an omen that was long enough on the topic.
So Garth, I guess the next one to that is then just how important is it to get that right, just in terms of that the evaluation of the talent to get it.
Yeah. And sorry, just to try to finish that thought, rather than where I was going, Mosk, I didn't answer your question was, hey, instead of playing 8 or 9 of the young kids together, where now you really may be at an overall talent deficit relative to your best 8, 9, 11 guys. Again, are there ways to mix them in a systemic, process-based way where now they're playing more and the group is better off because you're not riding the older players for as many minutes, and so now you're getting the dual benefits of development, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't have a big impact on competition. And again, I think you're talking about getting better performances on both sides of the ledger, fewer minutes for the older guys. But also, and this is just the fundamental thing, young players almost always get better. That is the nature of being 19, and if you go back to learning how to drive a car or ride a bike, or, like if you do it 100 times, you're probably better than once you do it, the first 7 or 8 times. So I just think it's embracing stuff like that and understanding that, when we get into evaluations, we tend to get hung up on negatives. So if a player makes a mistake, then we single that out. We say, hey, we can't have that mistake. But the reality is that veteran players make mistakes at nearly the same rate that young players do. We just are more attuned and we're more sensitive to it in young players because maybe the potential is there, but the ceiling isn't yet there. And I think, again, that's part of adjusting our thinking going forward, where we embrace the idea that young players are almost universally going to get better, particularly when shown confidence systemically, over the course of an entire season.
Thanks.
All right. Next question, go over to Felipe Makeda. Felipe, go ahead.
Thank you. Garth, you just said that you're going to...
Felipe, you're muted.
Let me see.
Still muted. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. You said that you're going to bring another players from Tacoma Defiance. And facing this big tournament, international tournament, what is the plan in terms of roster, of players for the roster for the World Clubs Cup?
Yeah, we still don't know, Felipe. We understand it was a topic that was discussed at the most recent FIFA conference, but that no decisions have been made. So we believe that it's going to be in early February, but we don't have hard dates and we don't have a location. So it is still impossible for me to answer questions about transfer windows and player registration and things like that, other than to say, I do think the tournament is going to happen, and I don't think those things will be very different than what they are ahead of an MLS season. I think you're going to have, roughly the same number of players. If you're talking about a February window, that means that we'll have been able to, probably the window won't have been open very long, but obviously we're in the process of evaluating players right now as we speak, started as soon as the season ended. And as always, we're going to wait and get the best deals, and we're not going to compromise anything, in terms of solely focusing on a couple games in February. We're going to look at the the full extent of the very likely 40 to 45 games we're going to play next year. But yes, we're looking at new players and looking at opportunities, and I do think that we will have one or two things come through the door this window.
Okay, reminder, if you have a question for Garth, go ahead and hit that raise hand function button. I do see there are a few follow-ups, and that's totally fine. We'll go to Ari next, though, for his first-time question. Ari, go ahead.
Hey, Garth. Thanks for the time. Two-parter for me. The first one is, do you have any update on João Paulo's status, just how he's doing with his rehab, and is your impression at this point that he's on track to be ready to go for preseason? And then second, just on the topic of the Club World Cup, I know you said you don't know the details, but just what are you anticipating the excitement level of getting to play in and compete in that event for the organization? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Club World Cup, I think, speaks for itself in the sense that, this is, we kind of made a big deal about winning Champions League. I don't know if you saw the guys dropping the things from the planes and the fireworks and the singing and all that. So, yeah, man, we're going to go for it in the Club World Cup. And I think it's going to be awesome. And, came up from a number of the players in the postseason meetings how excited they are to play in that. So I do think that is a monumental event. And I don't mean to make light of that by just saying we don't have a schedule, but we don't have a schedule. So we until we get a schedule, we can't plan our preseason. And there's just some logistical stuff we gotta climb over. But that stuff will come, and we will get fired up about it. And it's a lot. It's really something that everyone is looking forward to, and with a sense of optimism and hope and excitement. And so that'll be a good thing. In terms of JP, and I know you didn't ask about Obed, but he's on a somewhat parallel track. Andrew Thomas is a little bit behind those two guys, but Obed and JP are on a track where they could make it for the Club World Cup, again, without hard dates, without hard timelines. I think it's hard to say yes or no, and we're too far out as well too. You're talking about still something that's 4 months away. So they are making good progress. They're on schedule, and we've done enough of these rehabs, unfortunately, between Will Bruin and Jordan and Nico and I might be missing one other ACL we've had, but we got these pretty Roman Torres, I think was the other one I was thinking of. So unfortunately we've had a number of these. So we do have it pretty well dialed in at this point. And again, JP's really hard worker, just a really good pro, and he's doing everything he can to be available. And again, he's somebody where I think he's got a couple good years with us left, and we're not going to jeopardize that time, in order to rush him back for 1 or 2 games in February. But certainly that's the goal, and that's our ambition.
All right, I see a few follow-ups, and if you also have additional follow-ups out there, please go ahead, hit that raise hand function button. We'll go back to the top of the order. Nico Moreno, go for it.
All right, Garth, 2 good questions. One, Jimmy Medranda is one of those guys that, when healthy, seemed to give you something different at the left back position. He's out of contract. Is there any intent, or do you think that you'll be reaching out to him, or is that kind of just done and over with Jimmy?
Had good conversations with Jimmy. He wants to explore the market, which is he's earned. He has that right. That's how the system's designed for. But to be clear, I think it'll be a collaborative process. I think he'll look around, and we're exploring our options. And the one thing I would say, Nico, is for me, I thought Jimmy was more effective this year in advanced positions, meaning more left wingery than left back, to not use English words. But I thought he was pretty dynamic at times in attack, and not quite as successful at times in the back. So that might be something that we tweak how we deploy him, how we look at him. But to be clear, the honest answer is that one is totally up in the air and depends on some stuff that's out of our control. But again, it's been an amicable relationship, and we'll be in touch, and we'll see what happens.
And I wanted to ask you about Yeimar Gomez Andrade. You extended his contract. He gets a huge bump on his pay. The Senators haven't had a center back that consistent in terms of minute and that dominant in terms of stats, back to back, leading the league in interceptions and top 10 in terms of a whole lot of other statistics. So, what has that been and how important is that for you to build on by having a pillar in that center back position?
Yeah, look, Yeboah's been great, right? And Defender of the Year or runner-up 2 years ago, and then what I would say with him is, and with any player now crossing that threshold of 30, is they have to work even harder to stay healthy because little things can trip them up. And again, to his credit, I think he played in some pain for us in the Champions League. When he wasn't 100%, and he gave it. And he gave us some really big performances, and that's a credit to him. But it's just true that that fitness aspect is going to be crucial for his longevity going forward. But yeah, he's great. He's a great character. His athleticism is some of the top in the league. I think he's actually worked on his passing as well and gotten better at that. The coaching staff's worked closely with him on that. So yeah, I think he's a great piece for us. But look, one of the things that we got to look at, Nico, is that back line is basically the same group that was, I think, second in the league a year ago in terms of goals, right? If you look at Alex and Nuhu and Javi and Yemar, granted in the back five some of the time. And again, in Champions League, to be clear, I think we were the top defense. Alex maybe check that for me, but we were very good in defense in the Champions League. You were. And we had, to the CONCACAF Best 11, Nuhu and Javi named to that group. So, some of the best players on the continent at that point. But yet we seemingly weren't able to replicate that in MLS. So we do have to unpack that and try to have a systemic analysis as to, again, we know these players are good. Now, how do we get the group as a whole to be consistently and reliably at that standard where they were in the 21 season and during the Champions League in 22?
Okay, Jeremiah, go ahead.
I would assume that you've started doing some of this analysis already, that it's not like you're starting now, looking at some of the systemic problems. Is there anything that you feel like you have gotten your hands around at this point? You mentioned maybe needing to rotate with younger players a little bit more, but was there anything beyond fitness and that kind of thing?
Look, I think, yes, Jeremiah, your observation is correct that we are a little further along than maybe I have led to believe, but some of that stuff has to do with locker room and that'll stay internal. And again, that's not to suggest that we had issues in the locker room. What I'm saying is we may structure some things differently in terms of the day-to-day interactions with players. And there's some things that we may tweak structurally in terms of how we interact as a staff. And how we go forward on some of that. So I can't share all those things, but yes, to be clear, thematically, I do think if you take a super talented group and you have, that's made history, won the Champions League, and yet has played, I think you quoted this in one of your articles. I think we're below 500 since September of 2021. That is concerning. So we need to address that. And, one of the assets that we have, if you look at, I think it was under 23 player minutes, we finished fourth lowest in the league. You'd say, okay, well, we have these players that appear to do pretty well for us, at least in certain situations. Now, can we leverage that and can we use those more often in an effort to achieve consistency? Because again, our problem based on our outcomes has not been talent. It's been consistency. So how do you get to that consistency? That's the working hypothesis that I think that there is more we can do with our young players to work them into the group, to rely upon them, and to help the group have success as a whole over what will be a large number of games. Because I shouldn't say remember, but one of the things that is true, based on this year, we played 43 games, right? And it felt like a lot. But that is the new normal. When you look at a Leagues Cup competition, the Club World Cup, the Open Cup, in addition to the regular season and hopefully the playoffs, there are scenarios where you could play 60 games. Now, I think that's highly unlikely, and I think it's going to be more normal to play 40 to 45. But that is what we played this year. So if fatigue was one of our issues this year, then we do have to. Maybe not the only solution, but again, it's a pretty logical solution that we would then need to use more players in order to manage more games on a regular basis. And so I do think that is going to be a core finding of ours in terms of how we move forward as a club.
Felipe, did you have a follow-up, or are you
Yes,
good?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Garth, last season, even if the team wasn't doing good at the stadium, the fans still showing, even though it was a competition for fans. It was the Mariners, it was the rain, but the fans still coming to the stadium, even to the last game. What can you tell me about that? And the second question is, can you give us an update on what's the status of the new facilities?
Well, Felipe, thank you for that question. And first off, congratulations to the Mariners and congratulations to the Rain. Both of them had great seasons. It was really, really fun, especially to see the big crowd that the Rain got. And look, the great crowd that sat in the pristine air for 18 innings or whatever it was with the Mariners in the playoffs. So it's really fun to be in a place where all these teams are friends and friendly with one another, and it's fun to see those teams succeed. And to your question, Felipe, we are really grateful for our fan base. They are incredible. I still maintain that the Champions League final was the greatest sporting moment of my life. When the flashlights come on after the second goal, and then the earthquake sensors are being tripped, and then we score the third goal, and you would have thought the building might collapse. So our fans are amazing. They are inspiring, and they are very much a source of why we are successful. Again, we have owners that are willing to reinvest the proceeds of the club into the team's success. And so we are very fortunate on the management side to have those resources. But, by the fans showing up, by the fans supporting us, rest assured that is literally going directly into the team's success. And that's what's allowing us to, again, if Seattle's the 11th biggest city or whatever we are in the country, we have resources in excess of that. And the reason we have that is because of our fans. And look, some of those resources are also getting pushed into the training facility, and we are so excited about this. It's such a cool project. We are on pace to open in 2024. And again, we are working on partners to join us in that endeavor from the corporate standpoint. And we could have some announcements on that front potentially by the end of the year. But it's just going to be a paradise, a wonderland, to have our own place and to have, a number of fields that we control, to have a building that we control, and it's just state of the art and top class. It's just going to be great. I think it's going to be a game changer for our club. I think it's going to transform what we're able to do day to day. And we're just really looking forward to having one more year at Starfire and then transitioning over to Long Acres and really enjoying and reveling in what that is and what'll be coming. Because one of the key things about it is it will be accessible to the fans, just like Starfire's been, and hopefully our fans will be able to come there and share that great experience with us.
Thanks for your question, Felipe. Okay, working down the list. We'll go over next to Jada for her follow-up. Jada, go ahead.
Thanks. Garth, I just wanted to get a little bit more background on what you were saying as far as the young players and utilizing loans more with them. Can you explain a little bit more with that? And then also with some of the, like Nuhu was one that was talked about as far as loans and Javi. Where would that kind of play into some of the off-season roster movement?
Yeah, so let me tackle the last one first. So, we have 4 players that could play in the World Cup. Nuhu looks likely with Cameroon. Javi looks likely with Ecuador. And we're certainly hopeful. And I'd like to say that Jordan and Christian look likely for the United States. As they go into the World Cup, it's the biggest tournament in the world. It's the biggest platform. And obviously, if they have performances that are, the same level as they play with the Sounders, then there could be some opportunities for them. That's something that we'll evaluate if that comes to pass. And on the top end of our roster, I think that's the kind of stuff we're talking about in terms of could we transfer a player? Yeah, it's possible, but it's important to remember too that those transfers have to be mutual. That's not just the Sounders' decision. That's up to the player. Is that something they want to do? Is there a place that they want to go? And with respect to the loans, I think we're just talking about numbers of players coming through now that grows every year. And so we had some success loaning Ethan out a year earlier. We had some success loaning Soda Kitahara out, a Defiance player. And so, we had some success this year with Sam Adeniran going out on loan. And, what I would say is in the past, those things haven't always been as successful. And so we've been more reluctant to dip our toe in those waters. And all I would say is, I think going forward, we're going to be potentially more proactive in terms of trying to find solutions for our young players to get on-field opportunities, because especially those kids that are playing for youth national teams, they often are known pretty well around, in Europe and in other countries. And I think that's something that maybe we could improve on by giving some of those young kids some more opportunities.
All right. Maz, did you have a follow-up?
I do. Hey, Garth, I know halfway somewhere during the season, the practice kind of the intensity or the interval was changed. I know there's a part that each season you look at that. Do you all now have a pretty good idea after evaluating that going into the preseason now, kind of what to tweak and how that's going to go? You're not going to tell us, but I know that was something that you all looked at and changed.
Yeah. And I think that was in response to, again, just I think, I don't want to say the shock, but, we had a big load in the first half of the year, right? And so we had to manage that loading as we entered the back half of the season. But look, I think it's important to acknowledge that, the tweaks that we made, it allowed us to field healthy players, but I don't think we were playing our best, Moz. I thought for the first time, if you look at some of the numbers and you say, I think it was Alex, Jeremiah, you can help me, but I think we had 9 times we had a lead where we didn't win. 15 one-goal losses. Those are some very unsounders-like numbers, not typical for what we've been and who we are. And again, I think you have to look at that and say, look at the performances when we absolutely had to win at Vancouver, at Kansas City to stay alive. And we couldn't respond. And I don't believe for a second that the guys didn't want to respond or that they weren't giving their maximum effort. I know that they were. But for whatever reason, we couldn't answer the bell at the most urgent times, at the most critical point of the season. And I do think that we need to look, and again, to be clear, we are looking at how do you approach a season with 40 to 45 games and train players in a manner that is not just intended to keep people on the field, but is intended to make a greater number of players resilient and available. Because I don't think we can repeat the same process and with the number of players that we used over 43 games. I think we have to have more players involved in order to navigate the number of games that we are going to play next year and all the years going forward.
During the World Cup, what's that like for you? I mean, there's a GM part of it, there's a former player, there's a fan. Like, what's that like for you?
Look, I'm going to be rooting for the U.S., right? That'll be fun. Yeah. And Greg Berhalter and I were teammates on the immortal Raleigh Flyers in 1995. And, so there's little tidbits like that. He was the only field player I ever played with that talked more United, if you can even imagine such a thing. I'll be rooting, Greg's my friend, and I grew up with Brian McBride in the Chicago suburbs, and we're the same age. And, so we got some personal connections there to the staff. And, obviously with Jordan and Christian, hopefully both on the team, there's a lot going on, right? And to have 4 players in the World Cup, I mean, I don't know that many clubs in the world that maybe have 4 clubs. I mean, I'm sure there are other ones, but, at least within MLS, I don't think there are going to be many teams that have 4 players that play in the World Cup. So really proud of that. Really proud of those guys, and I'll be rooting for them. And I think that what's going to be fun for me, Maz, is watching games as a fan. To not have the stress of this doesn't affect our playoff stakes at all. But man, it's fun to sit back and have a stiff cup of coffee, because I think some of those games are on pretty early in the morning, and enjoy the games and enjoy the tournament, enjoy the pageantry, and it's a good moment for soccer. And if you look at that World Cup, and the next one's coming to Seattle, coming to the United States, that's a really cool thing. That's hopefully transformative for our league and our sport going forward.
Thanks, Garth. Appreciate it.
Not sure how many of you had the Raleigh Flyers on your bingo card, but if you did, full credit to those of you that know about that one. I learned something today. All right.
It's the same group that had the Bears scoring 33 points last night on the road in Foxborough.
Okay. All right. There we go. Jeremiah, I see your hand. Go for it.
I will note that I was very surprised by both the Bears scoring 33 points on the road and this tidbit about Greg Berhalter and you being teammates for the Raleigh Flyers.
That's a good one.
But yeah, that said, we haven't seen an announcement with the Defiance. I don't know if Marlon Vargas mentioned or made it implied that he's not coming back next year. Is there any other? Can you speak to that, and then any other sort of roster moves that might be going on with the Defiance?
Yeah, and look, Jeremiah, maybe be clear, my fault. We have not gotten this out in a more expedited fashion, so we owe you guys that. And all those decisions have been made. We've met with all the players. That's a matter of getting our ducks in a row and getting that stuff out to you. So we'll try to do that certainly by the end of this week. I don't think there's a ton of mystery there. It is correct that Marlon will not be coming back. I think if you look at the history of that position on that team, we've had a number of players that have actually been pretty good there. But the jump up to the first team is Nico Ladero and Albert Rusnak. And it's tough for a guy in Defiance to come in and play at that level. And it's a position that we're probably always going to spend big money on. And so again, Marlon's a guy who's been in our system for a number of years. Great kid. I think he's going to have a very successful career somewhere. And the best thing to do, I think, was to give him a chance somewhere else. And obviously we'll support him and we'll recommend him, and we'll help him explore those opportunities. But as you've heard me say in other settings, Jeremiah, I think we were talking about Ray Serrano a year ago. I think a big part of our success in player development has been our willingness to view these players as humans and as kids, and be willing to help them with their careers and their path as people, as much as prospects for the Sounders.
All right, Jada, I see your hand up for another follow-up. Go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the Starfire next year with the rain moving in. How does that kind of work on your end, as far as, I guess, sharing space, or what can you kind of explain about how the logistics will work?
I don't know that we know everything for sure, Jada. It's one of those things until it happens. I think it's all hypothetical. Obviously, we'll do everything we can to accommodate the rain and to help them out. But ultimately, it's not our building. We are tenants at Starfire, the same as the rain will be tenants at Starfire. So my understanding is they'll have a separate field that'll be dedicated to them. And beyond that, I'm not sure. We will be in the same footprint that we've been in all along. So I don't think any of our day-to-day stuff will change. And obviously, hopefully, Starfire is able to accommodate the rain to the best manner possible and give them the best chance to succeed going forward.
Nico Moreno, you're the last hand I'm seeing. Did you have another one?
Yeah, two quick ones. One, I mean, Garth, we've talked about got a cough. You're one of the best. Obviously, there's a job opening. It seems like your name could be right up. DC United just happened. How comfortable are you where you are? And, is there anybody coming for Garth at this point in time?
Look, I've had we're getting ahead of ourselves, Nico, because we still have the fan vote that has to be announced in terms of whether or not the fans want me back. And
Right.
So you got the GM vote, and then once you have the GM vote announcement, my understanding is that's going to come in, I think, in mid-November. I think it'll be announced at the annual business meeting. So we're a couple weeks away from that. And then obviously there'll be a Sounders piece where the Sounders decide, hey, is this something we want to do? And again, those conversations have always been amicable and friendly and positive, and no reason to doubt any of those things. And then ultimately it's up to me to make a decision with my family and see what's best for the next 10, 15 years. Hopefully in this business you can go another 15 years, and it's longer term decisions, and it's been and continues to be amazing here in Seattle. I don't know how you could ever have a fan base that is more supportive of a team. It is a privilege and a pleasure to be a steward of this club. And again, we'll get to the end of everything here, and we'll figure out what happens next. But either way, I'm certainly grateful for the first 8 years, and we'll see what happens next.
All right, final call for questions. If anyone has one, hit that raise hand function button. Going once. Okay, and just a couple of closing notes from us. As Garth mentioned, that Tacoma Defiance roster update, we will likely have that out by end of week, so stay tuned there. There will be more information on the club's annual business meeting.
I know we had some trials and tribulations getting through COVID, not just this group, but society as a whole. And we're kind of now finally getting back to normal. And I appreciate you guys being with us through thick and thin. And obviously a big moment with Champions League, but probably not as much fun to cover us the second half of the season. So we appreciate you sticking with us. We appreciate that you guys, I think, have always given us the benefit of the doubt. Not every press corps does that. And so we are really grateful for that. And we like to think we've earned some goodwill along the way here. But we're going to do our best to get right back up on the horse and get back in playoff contention and start winning things in 2023 again.
Thank you.
Can't top that. Thanks all.
Thanks, Sounders.
Merry Christmas. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, Jada. There you go.
You'll definitely talk to these guys before Thanksgiving. That I promise.